Okay, we're going to take a look and go through a build on the 22 foot flat car kits. The particular kit we're looking at in front of us is the Bill Myron Smalls kit, but this will serve as the instructional video for not only all the Bill Myron Smalls variations, but also the Bliss pattern uh, logging flat car, and any generic builds using this. Also the starting point for the stock car or gondolas or any other variations on it. So like I said, same stainless steel underframe piece for all. There's going to be the bodywork pieces as laser cut basswood, the bolster pieces, again, laser cut basswood, the deck, laser cut basswood, and there'll be this little uh, scored piece of spruce. This is the holding wood for the blocking for couplers and the truck screws. The kits, it's going to come as a piece of spruce. If you didn't want to use this, a piece of 1/16 styrene or acrylic, if you wanted to thread it, or you could even use a piece of brass shim in there in those gaps if you wanted to replace that. I'm going to start by pre-staining the wood. That's what I like to do, especially because the glue I like to use a CA type glue. A little bit of moisture in the wood helps it cure faster. So we'll just start with the underframe parts.
Apply a heavy coat of enamel spray paint to one side of the underframe to prevent electrical shorts.
To prepare the wood, I recommend pre-staining, and using a water-based stain or paint is helpful because it will help the CA glue to cure better. The goal here is to prevent glue spots from showing through paint or stain later as well. You can separate the pieces or stain them in the carrier piece altogether. Separate the wood parts so that the stain will dry equally. And even though this is fairly high quality basswood and doesn't fuzz nearly as bad as craft store stuff, I recommend using a sanding block to knock down any fuzz after staining. This block is great. It's I think 320 on one side and like 400 on the other. And great for final assembly. To prepare the underframe piece for assembly, we want to remove the glue from the ends of the cross members and the end beam area of the stills. Just a couple quick passes should strip the paint off there. If there are any burrs left over from manufacturing, a file should knock those off. And if it's really bad, contact us for a replacement. Next, this little guy, this is the spruce again. So we just need to separate it into its pieces. It should be 4 little pieces. Nothing pretty. I just kind of spin them in my hand to knock the if there's any ends off. So these are flat, unless we don't want them to be. Put both sides on a ruler or a square, and this one feels good. We'll do another video on a weathered car where we can deal with that. So let's go shiny side down. Right.
We'll start assembly by gluing the spruce holding wood into the underframe. Frankly, this is a lot easier to do with just fingers than tools. I'll use a pair of bending pliers here just so you can see what I'm doing and get my fingers out of the way. The most important part is to ensure that the spruce is flush with the bottom i.e., the painted surface. Doesn't matter what's going on up on the shiny side, but the painted side, we want it flush so that it's a good mounting surface. Um, the two longer blocks generally go in the coupler slots, and the smaller square blocks will go um, between the bolster cross members. And again, this is the holding wood for screws for the running gear, the trucks and couplers. Continue assembly with the side sills. The are generally have a top and bottom. It may be marked with a triangle on the interior side. If not that, look for the bolster holes. They will be towards the top painted surface because we're assembling upside down. Make sure that they're flush on each end, the same length as the underframe. And this is where the piece of paper that we're assembling on comes in handy because uh, we're probably going to get stuck to it, and that's better than our work surface. The paper and the glue will actually laminate and it reinforce these gaps, and that'll be hidden under the deck, so no problem. But this is probably the last time uh, before we're finished with assembly that we can get it off the surface. Again, make sure the side sills are flush to each end um, and not short on one end. With both side sills in place, check for the end beams. Um, Generally, they are the same both ways unless you've installed the buffer block first. That's a little easier sometimes to install the end beam and buffer block as an assembly rather than try and put the little buffer block on after the fact, as illustrated. If you take notice of where the end beam was connected to the carrier, there'll be a little bump or remnant of that wood. That's handy for keeping track of center line. And if you orient that to the center line in that holding wood in the coupler fork, that'll help you get both the end beam and the buffer block, in this case, lined up. Again, it's much easier to attach the buffer block to the end beam and attach the whole thing to the underframe as a assembly in most cases. Now we're going to mount the bolsters. Use a generous amount of glue on the bolster cross member because this is going to be subject to torque when we mount trucks. This is where we don't want failures. So we want both the bonding action of the glue, and since we're dissimilar materials, it's advantageous for that glue to, seep around the edges of the metal and form a mechanical bond as well. So we're going to get the two bolsters put on there. And if you watch closely, I double glue the second one. And basically the same
thing applies for the needle beams. Uh, some cars will have queen posts on the beams, some will just have chairs or even notches that are cut into the beam, all dependent on the prototype. So get those in there right on top of the cross members again. Some will have notches to recess into the side sill, uh, dependent on what prototype again. And at this point, before we're finished with assembly, I recommend a little bit of the CA in the corners to get those wood to wood bonds. And if that drips down into the paper again, that'll form a web between the two wood pieces. Dab off the bottom surface so there's no glue lumps. All right, after allowing adequate time for the glue to cure, we're going to just peel the underframe off the paper. So yeah, I may have been a little too generous with the glue, but we're good. So because we've got to sand this surface flat in preparation for getting the deck on there, because we don't want any bumps or burrs in getting this thing. Um, so just a little bit on this, just a little couple passes with the sanding block is usually enough. Usually. Like that. Make sure it all lines up. As you can see, the okay, before we put the deck on, we need to drill the holes for the running gear. There's little notches in the bolsters that mark center line, so we're going to use in this case, a thumbtack, or a thumbtack, a nail, an owl to start a drill hole so your drill doesn't wander, because off-center trucks are an odd thing. But we'll get drill holes started and drill the appropriate size holes for whatever trucks and screws you're using. The advantage of drilling these holes now before the deck's on is you can drill straight through without worrying about putting a hole in the deck. Now we're ready to complete the car body by attaching the frame to the uh, deck. The stake pocket notches should line up with the respective holes or stake pockets. Another quick note before doing this step: if you want to paint the car as a maintained in service car with a wood deck, painting before applying the deck is a great way to go. In fact, applying the details, if you're going to airbrush the car in its entirety, apply the details and paint it before gluing the deck on. Um, but should line up. The medium or gap filling type CA gives plenty of working time to make sure that overhangs are easy and alignment is correct. And by golly, that underframe weight is just enough weight to hold that thing flat while it cures.
With that, we can begin detailing the car. The paper parts are applied first. They represent strapping on the buffers on the end beams and the um, bolster ends. Underframe details are minimal. I generally don't model brake gear personally. Anything that's not seen in profile on the car, I tend to leave off. There is wire and there are levers supplied in the kits, the levers being paper generally or cardstock, to model rudimentary brake gear if desired. When it comes to installing the paper parts, I like to put a dot of glue on the location and, in essence, stamp the paper part off the work surface for the flat parts, like on the end beams. Um, Lining up the holes outline should be all the same from the same template. Continue applying the details. While the kit instructions give minimal suggestions for locations, looking at prototype photos for either specific locations or best practices is recommended in this regard. When it comes to applying the paper parts, I recommend putting glue on the location to be installed and then using the corner of a razor blade to pick the part and then apply it on top of that glue dot and let the glue then flow into the part. Um, in addition to the parts needed for the kit, I try and include a few spares of especially nut bolt washer castings when it comes to the assembly of these kits, because it seems like without fail one goes flying somewhere. In this instance, we've got a mixture of San Juan and Tichy parts. Um, some kits will feature our own parts. Again, those will typically be in cast resin. Treat them much like a plastic part, but the CA should adhere them just like everything else. I like to do this by putting a little drop on a piece of tape and using some needlepoint tweezers to manipulate the part. So trimming parts from the sprue. Again, here's inexpensive flush cutters from a floral department. Um, I like to go bevel towards the casting, and that way it kind of shoots into my work surface. Then I can capture it and apply it. When it comes to installing stake pockets, the single wire stake pocket from San Juan Details is a good match, except for I find it too tall. According to legend, when Grantline first made these, they were actually an ON2 part before being purposed for HOn3. So I do like to cut like 1/32 slice off the bottom of them to shorten them a bit. Find it looks better, especially on straight stilled cars. And again, use the same tools to apply it um, into the paired holes. So that's an example of detailing, and then just continue to fill those holes with the stake pockets and the nut bolt washer castings until complete. Again, prototype variations, but some kits will have turnbuckles where others did not have mid-rod turnbuckles. So I do find it somewhat easier to begin threading the wire through the turnbuckle when it's on the sprue, um, preventing turnbuckles and or wires from springing across the workshop, uh, spares included. Those inexpensive flush cutters are, again, a good tool to use for this. Helps reduce the amount of burr that may be formed on the end of the wire, which will interfere greatly with trying to thread the turnbuckles on. Place the wire truss rod assembly on the needle beams, and you can mark the wire with or make sure they're lined up. In the instance of the 28-foot cars, the wire length is, I think, 2 1/16 inch, but mark the breakover points where the chairs or queen posts will be. And use a flat needle nose. Works well for bending the wires. If your bend is too severe, you can just uh, squeeze it flat like that to reduce it. The wires work best if they're not fully seated on the deck. I mean, in real life, they go over the top of the bolster. Um, but a dab of CA on top of the truss rods at the needle beam locations does a great job to affix them. Don't be alarmed. It's a completely different car. I had to go back and reshoot some footage, but um, final assembly, like I said, we'll get the trucks and couplers mounted in their holes, and then we'll get the brake put on there. Assemble the brake. This will probably be plastic or resin, depending on the kit, and then just a spot of glue where it'll mount. Again, CA does a great job of bonding all these dissimilar materials together. Um, and that is the final assembly step for a 22-foot flat car. Thank you.